What's up, Facebook world? Or I should say, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube world, the social media world. How about that? Welcome to our Level 1 TechNet through Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Mike Morrison. I am the Education Director for Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association, and I am also a four-wheel drive trainer. Yes, I know that's a real job. My wife and I run Morrison's Outdoor Adventures, and I've been doing four-wheel drive training now for about 11 years. So a little bit about what we are going to talk about tonight. Tonight we are going to talk about modifying your vehicle, kind of the order of operations, how you should kind of go through the process of modifying your vehicle. And again, none of this is really set in stone, but there are some kind of things we want to think about when we're choosing modifications for our vehicle and the order that we do them in. But take care of a little bit of housekeeping for a little bit. So I'm doing everything on my own right here. So I've got my computer here, and we are using a new software so that we can put the live stream out on YouTube as well as Facebook and Instagram. So bear with me, okay? And we're having some connection issues, so bear with me a little bit. But if you post in the comments, I should be able to see everybody's comment, regardless of what platform you're watching on. If you post in the comments and you have a question, please preface it with the Q, then your question, and as soon as I can, I promise I will get to it. But occasionally you might see me kind of looking over to the side at the computer, trying to make sure the stream and everything's doing exactly what I want it to. Next on the list, coming up very soon in April, Be There or Be Square. You'll see a little ticker scrolling across at the bottom there, but we have Trail Fest coming up, right? Should be a QR code there for you to be able to click on, go sign up. You can't miss out on Trail Fest. This is our second year at Uwharrie National Forest. This is the last year at Uwharrie National Forest because Trail Fest, our plan is to move it every 2 years. Next year it will be somewhere new. I'm not going to give away those details, not going to steal Bo Rosa, our president's thunder there. But at Uwharrie National Forest, not only do we have the OHV trails in the National Forest, access to those, but also access to 2 pieces of private property, Grand Overland District as well as Big Creek, which are 2 amazing pieces of private property that both offer very different experiences as far as off-roading, right? So Trail Fest, guided trail rides. We've got an awesome raffle this year. Sarah, my wife, is the business director for Southern Four-Wheel Drive, and she is constantly reaching out trying to bring in stuff for the raffle. We've got 4 tire inflation systems from Moreflate. We've got recovery stuff from Warn. We've got recovery stuff from Rhino USA. And guess what? BF Goodrich has given us not 1, but 2 sets of tires, right? 2 sets of tires. And a set of tires is not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3, it's not even 4, it's 5 tires. Okay, so they are giving us 10 tires for the raffle. KO2 or KM3 up to 37-inch, right? So the only way to win them is for Trail Fest, buy raffle tickets. You better come. It's going to be an amazing experience. So make sure that you guys are coming. We'll be doing more live streams and stuff kind of leading up to there for that type of thing. So make sure that you are visiting that link down there at the bottom that's scrolling, or click on the QR code if you can take a snapshot of it with your phone, and go to Southern Four-Wheel Drive or SFWDA.org/event calendar, right? Event/calendar, right? Or dash. So let's jump right into it here. Make sure I'm pulling everything down there. Show a little bit about the tire ticking across the bottom there. But that's a little bit about Trail Fest. So outside of that, we've been working very diligently on the board, or most of the board has been working very diligently. You know, I just get to show up on live stream and talk to you, but Pam and Scott, and Sarah and all the other board members are all working extremely hard to make TrailFest great, but they're also reaching out and getting grants. Our grant or conservation guy, Kevin, is currently working on grants for Uwharrie National Forest, Coalmont. He's also looking at one down at Beasley Knob, I believe. So we're constantly looking and applying for grants. We have been awarded a grant, I believe, from Polaris. We're also looking at a grant from Yamaha. Even though we're not side-by-side stuff, they are willing to put grants in our direction. So extremely good news on that front. Terry, are those raffle tickets available to those who can't be there? No, unfortunately not. You have to be present at TrailFest to purchase raffle tickets and to win. So if you want tires, you got to be there. All right, let's, hey Norman, let's jump right into this. So this is just the start of our tech nets. I'm going to try as much as possible, guys, to do these weekly, but we're calling this our level 1 tech net, talking about modifications. Most of you, when you go out and you purchase a 4-wheel drive, one of the first things you're going to start doing is looking for modifications. Now, obviously, me being a 4-wheel drive instructor, my very first modification that I'm going to recommend to you is in yourself, right? Invest in yourself as a driver. Go ahead, sign up for a class somewhere. There's a lot of really great schools out there. Obviously, you can look at us and go ahead and get some knowledge about your vehicle. Every vehicle works a little bit different, whether you've got a Jeep, a Toyota, a Nissan, Ford, whatever it may be. It definitely is going to work differently. And even based on years, they can have some funky differences. For instance, 2010 or 2011 J case did not have traction control. 2012 J case did have traction control, right? And understanding how that traction control works is incredibly important. So invest in yourself as a driver. Take a little bit of time to learn the vehicle, get out and feel comfortable in it. But we all know that most of us that are in the off-road world, we can't take it. We've got to change the little things about our vehicles and sometimes the big things about our vehicles. So how do we go about doing that? The most important thing that we can do when we start thinking about modifying our vehicle is we have to know what we're going to be doing with it. Obviously, if we're just going to be, going on the trail ride couple of times a year, there's no point in completely building a buggy out of our rig. Might be fun, but there's not really a whole lot of point in that. We can take away a lot of the drivability on the road by doing that. And there are a lot of give and takes with different modifications. So what are we going to do with the vehicle? Are we going to be overlanding? Are we going to be just trail riding with friends on the weekends? Are we building a full-on rock crawler? Are we looking for something like a buggy or something that can really do difficult trails? Or are we just wanting to make our vehicle look a little bit more aggressive? So once we kind of decide what we're going to do with our vehicle, then we need to kind of start looking at our modifications after that. And we have to be careful about what order we do those modifications in. For instance, if you are looking to kind of go into trail riding or overlanding and we start adding a ton of weight to our vehicle, rooftop tents and roof racks and bumpers and winches and skid plates and armor and sliders. Now we're taking this vehicle that was built around being able to carry a specific weight or in a specific weight range, and we've added a ton more weight to it, right? And it's all what we would consider unsprung weight. Unsprung weight is anything that's above the suspension, right? Anything that is held up by the suspension. So we add all this weight to it. If we do that right off the bat, the vehicle is just going to drive terrible on the road. It's even going to drive terrible off-road. It's just not going to be a fun vehicle to drive. So we can plan that stuff out, but one of the very first things we really want to look at with our vehicle is a type of suspension modification. Even if we don't necessarily want a lift out of it, or if we don't necessarily want a lot of extra height out of it, we do want to look at being able to carry that extra weight. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we're going to run out and purchase our suspension right away, but we do want to plan that out. What springs do we need? Do we need a higher load capacity coil spring or leaf spring or something to carry that extra weight. So we can start kind of planning out some of our modifications. We definitely want to know how much armor or how much weight we're going to be carrying in the end. You know, if we're just building a trail vehicle that we're just going out on Saturday to ride the trail, you know, it's a day's riding back there, then we certainly aren't necessarily having to look at really putting a high load capacity spring on our vehicle. But if we're going into the overland world, or if we're really getting into a hardcore rock bouncer or something like that, then we do need to look at a different spring rate, because we are going to have a lot more armor on there, or we're going to be carrying a lot more gear. But even before we purchase that suspension, there's a few items, even if we don't modify our vehicle, that we need to think about buying first right off the bat. And they're kind of safety items, right? First and most important, if you're going to be taking your vehicle in any type of off-road scenario, you need to purchase a fire extinguisher, right? Purchase that fire extinguisher. That needs to be in your vehicle at all times. And obviously we need to purchase a first aid kit. I keep a backpack in my vehicle at all times. It's got a first aid kit in it, and it's got a fire extinguisher attached to it. Those are two items I keep in every vehicle that I'm in, regardless of whether I'm going on the trail or not. But some off-road items that we really want to think about, right, is we really want to think about having an air compressor. That's one of the most important things that we can purchase for our vehicle, because not only could we experience damage on the trail, right, where we lose a tire bead, or we get a nail or a rock slices our tire up and we've got to add some air to it, but we're all airing our tires down when we go off-road, right? Nod your head. Yes, we're all airing our tires down when we go off-road, because that's the tread lightly thing to do, right? So we all nod our head yes and say yes, we are all airing our tires down when we go off-road. So we need a way to air them back up before we speed up on the road. So an air compressor is super important. And we can't always rely on our buddy to have a good air compressor, right? So I think an air compressor is one of the first things that you need to purchase for your vehicle. For me, I prefer onboard air that's permanently mounted in the vehicle, because a lot of times they're a little bit more heavy duty and I can air up more than one vehicle in succession. I use the ARB twin compressor because it's 100% duty cycle, and I may end up airing up anywhere from 5 to 10 vehicles at a time, and I don't have to worry about it overheating. But portable air compressors like Viair, even ARB has portable ones. Ironman 4x4 has portable ones that you can look at. They're all great ones. There's even a really good one through Napa, the Maxi one, that does really well. But that air compressor is super important. But what's the next thing that you should purchase for your vehicle? For me, it's a basic recovery kit. You need to carry some basic recovery items. If you don't already have a winch on your vehicle, or you don't already have something on your vehicle as far as recovery, then you need to carry a high lift jack and a couple of recovery pieces with that high lift jack kit, so that you could winch with the high lift jack if need be. If you're going to be putting a winch on soon, a high lift jack is still very beneficial to carry. But you can also use a lot of the same pieces of recovery kit for a high lift jack with a winch, right? So kind of build your recovery kit out. Or none of us are going out off-roading alone, right? No, none of us are going alone. So get yourself a kinetic rope or a kinetic strap with some soft shackles and some bow shackles, so that you can do vehicle recovery. And these are just good items to carry. Even in inclement weather, I always make sure that up here in the mountains of Western North Carolina, when it's snowing or there's inclement weather, I carry some of these items with me, because I may be able to help someone out of a ditch, or someone may be able to help me out of a ditch if I've got those items. So a good recovery kit is a good thing to carry. Now we can start ordering that suspension, right? So when we order the suspension, we do kind of want to think about the timeline here, because even if we buy heavier springs for our vehicle, therefore heavier load, if we go ahead and put them on the vehicle, it's going to be a really rough ride too. So we kind of want to start getting the suspension and this stuff a little bit closer together, right? Maybe we go ahead and do some of the armor along with the suspension, like a front bumper with a winch on it is typically one of the first things that I'll go for, because now I can perform self-recovery. I can go ahead and winch myself out with a good anchor point or even to another vehicle if I need to, but I can use that winch for self-recovery, and I've got a little bit of good suspension to carry it. If I do one or the other, then I'm going to have to put up with, some inconsistencies in how that vehicle rides. So, for instance, if I go ahead and put a winch and a bumper on the front of my vehicle, then I start driving without a suspension. I'm going to get that floaty feeling in the front, right? Because the weights aren't quite right. Or if I put that suspension on, it's going to be a pretty stiff ride. It's going to be like you're driving in the old school CJs versus the new school JKs, right? Excuse me. So we kind of want to start thinking about doing some of this along with, if you're in something like a Jeep or even Toyotas, it is relatively easy later on down the road if you run like an ARB or a Ironman or some of these other lifts that Dobinsons that offer various different spring rates. It's not super expensive, and it's not really a hard task to swap out to heavier springs down the road. So we can kind of tune them. The shocks are all going to be the same. Most everything else is going to be the same. So we do want to make sure that, or we can kind of plan ahead, and swap out our springs down the road. Obviously, Facebook Marketplace or something like that can help you with selling that stuff off later on down the road. Make sure I don't have any questions here. Again, guys, if you have a question, go ahead and preface it with a Q and then dash in your question. That way, as I scroll back through the chat, I can kind of pick those up and work through. But if you have some questions about like spring rates for your vehicle and stuff like that, and what type of suspension, I'm going to touch on a few things, but I'm not going to get super in depth with it. There are some amazing shops that can help you out with that, right? And there's a few really great Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association business members that can help you out with kind of choosing that type of stuff, like Wheats Off-Road, Asheville Vehicle Outfitters, Weber Off-Road. Those are just to name a few, but there's tons and tons. Clemson Four-Wheel Drive Center. There's tons of great shops that support Southern Four-Wheel Drive that can help you kind of choose the right spring rate and suspension setup for your vehicle. So let's talk a little bit about suspension and choosing the right suspension for your vehicle. And we've talked about spring rate quite a bit. Let's talk a little bit about shocks, okay? Because now you're seeing a lot of different types of shocks on the market. Back in the day, it was pretty simple. It was like, hey, we got shocks for your vehicle, and when you lift it, they're a little bit longer. That was about what we had back in the day. But now you're seeing everything from triple bypass to remote reservoir to coilovers to, monotube and twin tube and foam cell and all types of different stuff on your suspension. I'm not going to go super in depth with this, but I do want to touch a little bit on the differences. We do have a question right here from Randy Lynn Rosa. What about adjustable steering stabilizers? Hers is, but I don't know why or how. Okay, so adjustable steering stabilizers are relatively new. I'd say that, they've been out for a couple years now, or starting to really get popular. Basically, what an adjustable steering stabilizer does is as you adjust it, you can make it stiffer so it's more responsive with your steering, or you can make it softer so it's less responsive. So you may like for it to be really responsive on the road, so you can dial it in to be really responsive and kind of twitchy on the road, very similar like a sports car or something like that, versus off-road. Sometimes we want it to be a little bit softer. We don't necessarily want to feel every impact on the tire, on the sidewall and stuff like that. Because remember, power steering and everything works both ways. Okay, so not only is it easy for me to turn the tires, but when I hit against that rock, it's easy to jerk that steering wheel out of my hand. So steering stabilizers can kind of help dampen that a little bit, and being able to adjust that not only to our preference, but also for performance. Randy, hopefully that answers your question. Next question I've got right here is from Nicole Dickens. See if I can show that up there. Looks like a can. My XJ, when I put on my Smittyville bumpers, the ride totally changed. Not a fan of the float. What would you suggest for a stiffer ride? So ultimately, if it getting that floaty feeling, then you've got to go with a stiffer spring up front. So you get that floaty feeling. If you like a stiffer ride where you're kind of feeling it more on the road, then you go with a stiffer, heavier spring rate on the front end. On XJs, I don't know which company would be the best one to do with that. You could also go with like a dual rate spring or a progressive spring, but you are going to want to up that spring rate a little bit. Here we go. Bo threw it up there. He said Wheats Off-Road, Weber Automotive, or Off-Road Diesel Performance, Piedmont Performance, Off-Road Gear. So tons of different shops he's listed in there. Randy, would I need to adjust that when you got an alignment? No, you would not have to adjust that when you got an alignment. It should not change. If it's just adjusting the softness and everything of the steering stabilizer, you should not have to adjust that at all. Joshua Fisher, you had 2 minutes presentation on how to apply lipstick. Yeah. All right, so kind of moving on, let's talk a little bit about shocks, okay? What's the difference between a shock and a spring, right? So coil springs or leaf springs or different types of setups. What's the difference? So a spring's job is to control the height of the vehicle and to carry the load, okay? The shock's job is to convert kinetic energy, basically, into thermal energy or into heat. So as a shock is going down the road, its job is to dampen what the spring is doing. If we were to take shocks off our vehicles and go down the road, basically we hit a pothole, the spring is going to keep doing what it's doing or bouncing until something applies to it to slow it down or to stop it, another force. That's a shock's job. Ultimately, it's a dampener. So all shocks, whether it's a coilover or if it's a strut, monotube, twin tube, whatever, its job is to dampen the load, right? To dampen that load. And how it does that, it experiences a kinetic force to it, and it translates that into heat in the oil inside of the shock. So that's basically what a shock's job is. Now, it starts to change a little bit. Newer vehicles, coilovers, and struts, right? That's where you're getting the actual coil spring is over top of the shock or around the shock, but it still serves kind of the same purpose. The coil spring is carrying the load. The shock is dampening that coil spring or dampening that kinetic energy. So we've got to have shocks on our vehicle. Now, there's tons of different types out there. Most vehicles, not all, right? Obviously, you can get higher performance vehicles like the Raptor and some of our off-road trim pickup trucks and 4Runners and Jeeps and stuff come with heavier duty shocks, but most vehicles are coming with what we call a twin tube shock. This is the most basic style of shock on the market. If you go to, in old days, we called them shock absorbers. Yeah. If you go to Advanced Auto Parts or something like that and you see just a basic shock on the shelf, an OEM replacement from your manufacturer, it's most likely going to be a twin tube shock. It's the most common. Most of the time it has not only oil on the inside, but it also is some type of gas charged shock. And what happens, because these are just kind of a cheaper shock, a cheaper alternative, as that oil, because the gas pressurizes in there and as that oil passes back and forth, that oil can cavitate when we start to cycle it a whole lot. It's also not built very heavy duty because it is, again, the cheaper alternative. The step up from that would be what we call a monotube shock. Now, looking at shocks, there's not a whole lot of way to tell the difference. Okay, a monotube and a twin tube shock look essentially the same, but a monotube shock is going to be more heavy duty and more robust. Most of the time, it's not going to be gas charged. It's just strictly going to have oil in there. And it is going to be a good chance thicker than your standard 12 twin tube. So it's going to be a larger diameter. So those monotubes, a lot of times for like your Old Man Emu suspensions, your Ironman 4x4 and stuff like that, they're going to be part of the basic kit that you purchase. They're going to perform extremely well in most everyday type scenarios. You're going to be able to use those and never really experience it. Now, experience what we call shock fade because of cavitation of oil or stuff like that. Most of the time, because of what we're doing, is low speed. Now we go further than that, and we get into what we call remote reservoir shocks or bypass shocks and stuff like that. Then we're starting to get into more high speed applications, right? More high speed applications. Those basically, they carry more oil in them, and some of them use fancier ways to bypass the gas, the nitrogen gas in the oil, so that there's less cavitation. But overall, the ultimate job of those more expensive shocks is to do a better job of dissipating that thermal energy, dissipating that heat off, whether it's by a remote reservoir carrying more oil, or if it's because of bypass shock, it bypasses some of the oil around and does a better job of keeping the gas and the oil separate. So they're all just kind of dissipating. I got my notes here, but they're all dissipating that thermal energy one way or the other. So actually got a question here before I go too much further. Question: if I go up from 35 tire to a 37-inch tire, is there anything I need to do to adjust on my rig for the difference? A little bit of a loaded question. So that's from Wendy. Let me see if I can show that one up there. That's from Wendy, who is our communications director from the board. Hey, Wendy. If you're going up to a 37-inch tire from a 35-inch tire, I know you've already re-geared, so we shouldn't have to worry about our gearing. You may, depending on the height of your vehicle, you may have to do some trimming, or you may even have to go to a different wheel with a different style offset. For your vehicle, I wouldn't necessarily think that you would have to make any changes when you go to a 37-inch tire. You've already re-geared. You've got a pretty good wheel on there now with some offset on it, so it shouldn't make a whole lot of difference. So you should be able to go to a 37-inch tire relatively easily. So, all right. Now, when we start looking at some fancier shocks like coilovers, coilovers are a big one, right? What is a coilover, and what's the difference between a coilover and a strut? Okay, a strut is basically the same thing as a coilover. The coil is over the shock, right? That's where the coilover comes from. But a true coilover and a strut is different. Again, I'm not going to go super in depth, but I'm going to just kind of lay it out. A strut, the coil around the strut carries the load, but ultimately it is just a monotube or a twin tube shock inside of that coil. There's no real adjustment there. Yeah, maybe we can change out to a heavier spring, but that's about all there is involved in that. Whereas a coilover, a true coilover, is going to be different. Number one, chances are the spring's going to be a whole lot longer. It's going to cover more of the shock. Chances are, not 100%, but it's going to have adjustability, so we can actually change the height, or in some cases, depending on the style vehicle it is, if it's independent front suspension, may be able to change the camber of the vehicle as well. So a coilover has adjustment in it. Now, coilovers, again, can be remote reservoir. They can be bypass, all types of different things. But a coilover, essentially, we can adjust the height of the vehicle. So ultimately, that's kind of where a coilover goes. And if you're in something like, say, a Jeep Wrangler or a Jeep Gladiator that typically has a spring with a shock separate, it's not a strut, a coilover replaces that whole assembly, right? So a lot of times those suspensions take a whole lot to kind of change that. So just kind of going in depth on shocks there. There's some other things to look at with suspension systems. And again, there's some great shops out there that can probably give you a lot better advice than I can. I tried to get an expert tonight, but you guys got stuck with me. But with solid axle vehicles, you can look at things like long arms and short arms. There is a difference. Typically, long arms are going to give you more suspension flex. It's going to correct the caster and the drive line and everything on the vehicle. where a short arm kit's going to keep everything kind of stock. You're not going to have to replace the short arms, but you are going to limit what that vehicle can do. With same thing with like independent front suspension vehicles, you can get a long arm kit, or they don't call them long arms, they call them long travel kits, right? Where we can get more travel out of independent front suspension. But there's a takeaway from that. You're probably going to get a lot more body roll and sway on the road. A lot of them do away with things like sway bars and such. So when we're choosing these suspensions, we need to think about how much driving do we do with our vehicle. Do we do a lot of driving on the road, or do we not do a lot of driving on the road? Are we towing it? Like me, I tow my Land Cruiser everywhere. I don't care what happens to it, right? I don't care a whole lot about the suspension as long as it works off-road, because I don't drive it on the road a whole lot. But my Ram gets driven on the road everywhere. If I put a suspension on it, I don't want it to change the on-road characteristics at all. Because I tow with a lot. So I want to keep that kind of stuff together. The last thing I'll touch on with suspensions, right, is you'll hear a lot of people talk about sway bars. What does a sway bar do? Actually, before I move on to that, Nicole said, when I win a set of the BFGs at Trailfest, would I need to do much to the Yoda to go from 33s to 35s? Haven't had any issues with my 33s, 2.5-inch Davidson's lift. You're definitely going to have to do some trimming on the 4Runner. Trimming, and you'll probably have to do some heating up of the inner fender liner. Some of that will also depend on the offset of your tires. It can be done. It can be done, but it is a lot of trimming, and you maybe have to do a body mount chop, which is, even though it sounds scary, it's incredibly easy. Most shops are going to look at somewhere around like the 4 to 4.5 hours to do that. Or if you know somebody that's got an angle grinder and a welder, you can do it. It's not incredibly difficult. But yes, you can run 35s. It will not be as happy on 35s. It would like to be regeared, but the 4Runner still does pretty good on the road. So it's not going to be, the end of the world if you don't regear it. Excellent question. So talk about sway bars. What does a sway bar do? This is a question that comes up almost every single class I have, is what does a sway bar do? Well, it controls the sway of the vehicle. Perfect answer. Let's move on. I'm joking, right? But it does. It controls the sway of the vehicle, or better yet, it controls the body roll in correlation between the unsprung weight and the sprung weight, right? Sorry, I did that in reverse. The sprung weight and the unsprung weight, okay? So what is unsprung weight? It's anything below the suspension. Sprung weight is anything above the suspension. When you're driving down the road and you go around a turn, that sway bar limits how much the body or the sprung weight can roll away from the unsprung weight, okay? Basically keeping you on the road. Yeah, yes, Wendy, it keeps your vehicle on the dang road. That's right. So, and you'll hear a lot of people, especially on old school vehicles, right? Leaf sprung vehicles like CJs and stuff like that. And older more trail ready rigs, pickup trucks. They're gonna say, I don't have a sway bar. You don't need them on the road. Yes, you do. Modern day vehicles are designed to be more comfortable, so we get a little bit more plush ride. But take even a Jeep Wrangler, for example, a new JL, they flex like crazy. If we take the sway bar off, yeah, everyday driving is going to be fine. But if you ever have to make evasive maneuvers on the road, I don't care how good a rally driver you are, there is an extremely good chance that you could induce a rollover. So I do recommend keeping your sway bars on the front and the rear of your vehicle, even if you're a great driver, right? Now, you can get what they call sway bar disconnects, where we can disconnect that sway bar off-road and gain a ton of extra suspension flex. So especially the front end, you'll even notice that a lot of vehicles, your Rubicon Gladiator, your Rubicon JL, your Power Wagon, Broncos, they all come with sway bar disconnects now. Even Toyota has their KDSS suspension that kind of improves the suspension flex. So Uh, Again, I do recommend keeping that sway bar disconnected off-road, but have it if you're going to be doing a lot of on-road driving. If you're going to be, you know, again, on a trailer, sway bars aren't that big a deal. But disconnecting your sway bar is one of the best improvements you can make to your vehicle. Hands down, one of the best improvements you can make. So moving on from suspension, okay, moving on from suspension, talk a little bit about armor. Okay, now there's all types of armor that we can put on our vehicle. We can get a bumpers, front and rear. We can get rock sliders. We can get skid plates, you know, and there's even now where, excuse me, they're starting to get other types of armor out there, you know, around wheel wells and stuff like that. But when we start looking at this stuff, we really want to start thinking about what truly is armor. Okay, first off, these these steps, a lot of times that your vehicle comes with from the manufacturer, like the ones that have the little hang down steps and stuff on there, or these little round tubing steps and stuff like that. Hey, James. Yeah, yeah, Byron, don't be cheap when it comes to armor. That is 100% correct. Um, and some of these stamped steel bumpers that are coming, these are not true armor, okay? Especially these steps. This is a very commonly overlooked thing. The second you get off road and you hang some of this stuff up on a rock or you catch it on a stump or something, number one, it's going to rip it off, or a portion of it at least. Number two, it's probably going to cause more damage than if you didn't even have it on there, because it's going to bend up into the vehicle and it's going to cause some damage to the body or to the paint. So really think about what it is. If it's something like a bumper, right? Is it mounted to the frame? What's it mounted with? Rock sliders, are they bolted to the frame? I recommend rock sliders that are bolted to the frame, even on the old school TJs where they had them where you could build them into the body. I still recommend them being bolted into the frame. Those of you with XJs and Jeep Cherokees, you don't have a frame, so I'm sorry. I'm joking. Again, I'm joking. To the unibody frame on those as well. If it's a rear bumper, same thing. We want it bolted to the frame. So that's where we start really seeing true armor. The factory skid plates that you're getting on vehicles, most of these are not true armor. Number one, they've got to keep the weight down. So a lot of times it's just stamped steel or aluminum, or hate to say it, but some of these off-road vehicles are using plastic, right? So we really want to think about these things. But we can very easily, again, great aftermarket support in the industry, so we can start looking at it. So what's the number one thing? The first thing that I'll change as far as armor, I always, if I'm going to be doing hard, well, not even hard, if I'm just going to be wheeling my vehicle, meaning I'm going to be in four-wheel drive low range and I'm ever going to experience stumps, rocks, or roots, rock sliders. Rock sliders 100%. Because number one, the wheelbase in between the front and rear tire is the most vulnerable area of your vehicle. Okay, that rocker panel right along there is the most vulnerable area of our vehicle. So as we are crossing over rocks or as we're working our way around trees and stuff like that, those areas could easily get damaged. And they are the most expensive from a body repair standpoint to fix, because it's not just a fender you can take off or a quarter panel you can take off. They have to physically, if they're going to replace it, they have to cut it out and then they have to weld in a new piece, or they have to beat it out and then they have to do Bondo. So it's incredibly hard to fix those areas. The next piece of kit that I recommend is changing over to a winch ready and putting a winch in the front bumper. Again, this is for self-recovery, safer recoveries, even in a group. But a winch and a bumper is super important. Number one, it gives you some armor on the front end, but a lot of times it also gives you a good quality recovery point on the front end that you can hook to, because most of these vehicles, the recovery points on the front end are not recovery points. They're tie down points or they're tow points, not true recovery points. So an aftermarket bumper will give you that. And again, the winch will give you the ability to do some self-recovery, right? And I'm going to do a pause here before I continue on. For those of us that are joined on, we are up to 30. I love it, guys. We are up to 30 watching it. But for those of you just joining us, a couple of things to share with you, right? A couple of things to share with you. I would love for you guys to join us at TrailFest this year. So TrailFest is one of 2 events that Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association puts on. This is where the money that they put towards grant projects, fighting legal fees and stuff like that to keep our parks and stuff open and our public access open, that's where it comes from. So come to TrailFest. Right now you'll see a ticker there along the bottom. It's got sfw.org/event-calendar. Go there, or right there, there's a QR code for you. It'll take you right to where you need to sign up for TrailFest. And that is incredibly, incredibly important that you guys come and support Southern through that. All of Southern Four-Wheel Drive is a nonprofit. All of their funds go into supporting those types of things. You know, a lot of people look and they think that the board is getting something out of it. I can tell you right now that Pam, Scott, Wendy, Karen, Sarah, myself, even Bo, you know, as we travel to these events and we do these things, all of this comes out of our pocket. We don't take anything back from Southern. So all of Southern's funds are going in to support its mission of conservation, education, and recreation. So awesome. So make sure you go and sign up. Also, I really 100% want to thank our sponsor, one of our biggest sponsors, right? As Bo always says, BF Goodrich has been good to us, right? So for TrailFest, they gave us not 1, but 2 sets of tires. And a set of tires is not 1, it's not 2, it's not 3, it's not 4, it is 5. 5 tires. So they gave us 10 tires for TrailFest to give away at the raffle. Either 5 KO2s or 5 KM3s up to 37-inch tires. So make sure that you are at TrailFest buying raffle tickets for a chance to win those tires. And most importantly, after you get off this live stream, send BF Goodrich a message on Facebook or Instagram thanking them for supporting Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association. So, all right, let me continue on. Got a little bit of that out of the way, right? Got the BF Goodrich tires right there. I got my shirt and my hat from BFG. I had to do a lot of begging to get this, right? All right. So moving on with armor, right? So we talked about the sliders and we talked about the Ryan, yeah, you're winning. I hear you. Front bumper, sliders. What's next, right? Well, there can be a little bit of a toss-up here. So do we get a rear bumper now, or do we go ahead and do sliders next? A little bit of that depends on what you're going to be doing with the vehicle, okay, and what type of vehicle it is. For me, in my Land Cruiser, before I go putting skid plates on the vehicles, I've got to figure out a way to carry my spare tire, because we all carry a spare tire, right? Nod your head. Yes, Mike, we carry a spare tire. So how do we carry that spare tire? It doesn't fit in the factory place. If I've got it bouncing around inside the vehicle, now it's a danger, right? If I got a pickup truck, yeah, I can tie it down in the back, but maybe a rear bumper is what I need with a swing out spare tire carrier to carry that spare tire, right? Not necessarily there for any major extra armor, but I've got to carry that bigger tire somewhere, right? I can't necessarily fit, you know, say a 35-inch tire under my Land Cruiser. I can't fit a 35-inch tire on my Land Cruiser anyway, but it certainly wouldn't fit underneath of it, right? So Randy Lynn Rosa loves her spare tire. I know, Randy, you need to take a level 1 class again, right? So joking, Randy, don't hurt me. But if we do have a pickup truck, or your spare fits underneath the vehicle, and you're going to be doing some hardcore, again, on some rocks and stuff, maybe we do need to look at skid plates underneath the vehicle. And not going to name any specific vehicles. If we've got some of these four-wheel drive vehicles that we're using that have the new plastic transmission pan, or the new plastic oil pans, or anything like that, we definitely need to look at putting a skid plate to protect those. Super important, right? That really will protect those newer things. And again, we hate that those things are becoming plastic, but again, they've got to reduce the weight on these vehicles for fuel economies. And there is a little bit of, excuse me, a little bit of difference in materials with the plastic that they're using. So in that realm, I would go after skid plates next. And a lot of times with a independent front suspension truck, because that independent front suspension can dive and do some damage, I will put a heavy duty skid plate on the front. So now we've done all this stuff, right? We've made all these changes to our vehicle. Guess what? Your vehicle is going to be a whole lot heavier, than it would have originally been, or it may even be heavier than what they're saying is a gross vehicle weight rating. Okay, and we know, right? Especially you overlanders out there. I don't call it overlanding anymore. It's overloading, because we carry so much stuff. You're over your gross vehicle weight rating of that vehicle. So what does that mean? Number one, you shouldn't be driving on the road. I'm joking, right? But really, we need to think about what are we doing with our vehicle moving forward, because it is unsafe on the road at this point in time. It no longer stops like it. Yeah, Josh, I hear you, man. It's definitely not going to stop the way it should. Not to mention now we've probably got a lot larger tire size on there, so we've got a whole lot more rolling mass going down the road. You need 100% to look at a brake upgrade. As if not on all four wheels, you need to at least look on the front too, because again, 60% of our braking force is here at the front. Okay, the other 40% is here at the back. So we need to look at a brake upgrade on the front. One of the best brake upgrades out there that you can look at right now is a company called Power Brake. The gentleman that runs Power Brake, DeLon, they build brakes for trucks in the Dakar, and they've been building brakes for overseas military trucks and all types of stuff. They are a phenomenal braking platform, and they understand the off-road world better than some of these other companies out there. And they make an extremely good kit. It's not cheap, but safety isn't cheap, right? So a good brake upgrade kit. I know Terraflex and some of those others have some for Jeeps, but the Power Brake kit is an exceptional kit. And the number one thing I love about the Power Brake kit, and this is coming from experience, is they don't do any of that cross-drilled rotor stuff. They only do slotted rotors. I hate to tell you, but those cross-drilled rotors are nothing but something to grab mud and hold on to mud. So keep that stuff in mind. Yeah, Norman Cole runs Power Brakes. Yeah, I swear by Power Brakes. I think they're probably one of the best upgrades for vehicles on the market. So yeah, David, upgrading to some braided brake lines. Yeah, because brakes can experience some more damage, especially if you're running an older vehicle or if you need extended brake lines. The only downside to braided brake lines is if you have an issue, right, on the trail, it could be harder to clamp those. But they are going to be more heavy duty. They are going to hold up a lot better. So Randy said, if I'm adding all this weight to my rig to keep it protected and functional, but still need to tow my sleeping quarters behind me, how do I determine what a safe tow weight is now? So that's hard, because it's not hard, but again, we're going to be well over this number. There's what we call gross vehicle weight rating, which is the weight of the vehicle, right? With occupants, fuel, everything. That's everything, the vehicle by itself. Then you're going to have a gross vehicle combined weight rating, right? Where it's the vehicle and what we're towing, okay? And a lot of times this may be a little bit of a moving number because some things can change it, from weight distribution hitches, does the trailer have brakes, that type of thing, right? For instance, my Ram, right? My Ram that we tow our camper with, okay, it's got a gross vehicle weight rating. I think it's somewhere around 8,800, 8,900 pounds, something like that. That's the gross vehicle weight rating. But the combined gross vehicle weight rating is over, I think it's right at like 19,800 pounds. So that's the vehicle and the trailer. Okay. Now, not all vehicles are going to have that combined gross vehicle weight rating, but hopefully they do. That way we can be a good judge of that. But if your vehicle isn't necessarily meant for towing, I hate to say it, but Jeeps are not meant for towing. Jeep Wranglers, that is, aren't meant to tow. They may not have that number, or it may not be readily available. But check in your owner's manual. You never know, right? Like the Gladiators, they are going to have a gross combined weight rating. So make sure you check that out. All right. Let me double check to make sure everything here is where it's supposed to be. I think. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think Norman can sell you a set of power brakes. Anyway, all right. So brakes, right? Brakes are super important to upgrade. Now, I'm not going to go too much more in depth in kind of upgrading and stuff like that. We've talked a little bit about some different things, but a couple of things that I carry in my vehicle, and I didn't mention this earlier, and I should have, right? I didn't mention this earlier, and I should have, along with my first aid kit, recovery kit, and all that. I carry a spill kit in my vehicle. Just in case something comes up and I start leaking fluids or whatever, I can pull this spill kit out and I can clean up after me. But I also carry a field expedient repair kit, which includes tire repair kit, basic fixes, and stuff like that. So we'll kind of look at that and check that out maybe on a later TechNet, right? Maybe on a later TechNet. All right. So we've made all these modifications and stuff to our vehicles, and we've kind of gone through that. Now, I only got a few minutes left, so I don't want to go much over an hour, if at all. But the next TechNet that we're going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about now that you've modified your vehicle, what do we do with it, right? We're going to talk a little bit about finding places to go, how to kind of get your vehicle ready to go, like vehicle 360s or post-trip inspections, that type of thing. And we're going to kind of cover that, some different mapping softwares and such. So we're going to kind of talk about that in the next TechNet. I'm hoping that we'll be doing this TechNet weekly. But again, super limited with time. So if I don't get it next week, it's an extra week in between. I'm sorry. But most importantly, guys, I can't stress this enough. Come to TrailFest. Come to TrailFest. We're going to have classes there. You get to shake hands with people like Bo Rosa and Wendy on the board, and Randy and Sarah and all those cool people on the board. Give them a pat on the back for all their hard work. Kind of as me, I just come on here on these live streams and talk to you, but the board really has been working hard. So let me pop up. I got a longer question here. Let's see. Before I move on. First, thanks for sharing your knowledge. This can be answered at the end. I know the majority on here may have a Jeep, Toyota, etc. What's your thoughts on the 07 to 13 Chevy Tahoe suburban platforms for overland, mild off-roader? Any shops in the upstate South Carolina or Western North Carolina area for these platforms? So, again, for me, when I start thinking about types of vehicles, I'm not really a purist. I think that whatever we can get into and spend less money on and more money on the adventure, go for it. Personally, I love the Tahoe platform. I think the Tahoe platform is probably a very overlooked vehicle. Number one, it's got a lot of room. Number two, it's got a good drivetrain. It's got a very tested drivetrain with it. Chevy always has really good drivetrains that go along with it. So they can be a great vehicle for overlanding. As far as aftermarket parts for it, there's not a ton out there, but upstate South Carolina, I would check out Clemson Four-Wheel Drive Center. In Western North Carolina, then I would check out Asheville Vehicle Outfitters. If you call actually Norman Cole that's on here, if you call Norman, he works for Asheville Vehicle Outfitters. would probably be able to look up and give you some options on that vehicle. Or if you talk with Renee or Cole down at Clemson Four-Wheel Drive Center, same thing. So kind of whichever one of those two is closer for you would be great. But again, it's whatever we can get into, right? I mean, I wheel a 1999 Toyota Land Cruiser. I used to have an older Tahoe way back day, and it was a great vehicle. So it's whatever we can get into. Again, it's not going to have like the trash control and stuff like that, but there are some options to kind of overcome that left foot braking and such. So wheel what you can, right, and enjoy it. All right, guys. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about. The next one is what to do now that we got our vehicle modified. But come to Trail Fest, guys. I can't stress that enough. Come to Trail Fest. Support our sponsors: Warren, Rhino, Moreflate, BF Goodrich, all great sponsors that are really working hard to help us keep the trails open. So support them. Send them a message. Yeah, Clemson Four-Wheel Drive Center, man, they've been open over 50 years, so you've been there for a while. So definitely support those sponsors. Send them a message. Let them know thank you for supporting us. It is super important. But I hope to see you at Trail Fest, guys. But look for a post hopefully Tuesday next week. I'll see you guys again on TechNet. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And most importantly, guys, to help us get the message out, get out there, like, share, tell your mom, your dad, cousins, uncles, dogs, hairdresser. I don't care. Tell the postman about these tech nets and about Southern Four-Wheel Drive Association, guys. Thank you so much, and get out, find some adventure, and we will see you guys next time. Enjoy.